There's no such thing as being too needy. There's asking the wrong person. There's expecting too much of one person. But ultimately, your needs are valid because your needs are signposts as to what you require to be healthy, happy, and whole. Provided it's not that you need crack. Right? Provided it's not that you need to do something illicit. Your needs, for the most part, are valid. And so in this episode, we are going to talk, cousins, about why the happiest and most successful individuals are needy as a mug. Okay? And you will walk away from this episode with the confidence to go about the business of standing on business to make sure your needs are met. So we'll start off like this. We're going to start out with being your own rescue, and then we're going to venture into the land of counting on others. So I, for one, have always kind of sort of been pretty self-reliant. I enjoy my own company. I really do. I do skits on my own. I write music on my own. I go on solo trips. I take myself out to dinner. I take myself out to movies. Is it because I have no friends and I'm a creepy person? Maybe. No. It's more because I really enjoy my own company. I love time alone with my thoughts. And I also have this sort of career path where I have to be in front of people a lot. I have to extrovert a lot for a living. So I like my own company. With that, I am learning that there are certain people who are more like, yeah, boy, self-reliant, learn for one reason or another not to lean on others as much. And so our work is learning to count on others, because what are we at the end of the day? We're social primates, which means that we are not an independent, but an interdependent species, right? Over the millennia and decades and centuries and whatnot, what kept us alive? It wasn't that we were the fastest. It wasn't that we were the strongest. It wasn't that we were the most ferocious in a, sense. It was that we were adaptable and collaborative, right? And so somewhere along the line, a lot of us learned that the way to receive love, that the way to be in this world where you can't count on others and it's a cold world, is to have no needs. And guess what? That doesn't work. It doesn't work because you have needs. It doesn't work because you need to count on others. And guess what? Just because you had some experience once upon a time with a dusty or an unreliable person or a crappy friend who made you feel like you couldn't count on them or like your needs were too much, doesn't mean it's unsafe to have needs and source those needs. So there are some people who need to learn how to be a little bit more independent, but there's a whole bunch of us who get to work on having needs, voicing our needs, and go about the delicious business of making sure our needs are met. So let me tell you what had happened, cousins. I went to Boston the other week for a little solo dolo trip, you know what I'm saying? Because what's the point of working remote if you don't do interesting things, right? So, we're having a very mindful trip in Boston. Why am I speaking so much on internet today? I don't know. I just feel like it, okay? I'm having a very mindful trip in Boston. I'm not going to say it. Okay, I'm going to say it. It was very demure. It was. And I thought to myself, well, I didn't really make any plans to see friends, but I would love to see some people while I'm up here. I have a few friends who moved back to the area, and I love that they're closer now. It's nice being a few miles from people versus a few thousand miles from them. And so I said, you know what? My former self, who thought I was a burden to others, because that's what I used to believe, that if I asked for more support, if I had the gall to count on friends to help me meet my social and emotional need for connection, I thought I was too needy and too much and a burden. And so my higher self spoke to me and was like, my guy, hit your friend up last minute and say, hey, I'm around this week. You want to co-work tomorrow and just hang out? And to some of you all, you're like, okay, that's not a big deal. But to somebody who has had to overcome the programming of that narrative of, oh my gosh, I'm a burden to others. I know I'm not. The people who often think that are such a riot. Such a good time to be around. But you can carry that narrative. And so I had to overcome that. And I hit my friend up and I was like, hey, I'm around. You want to do the thing tomorrow? Hang out and stuff. And she was delighted. She was like, absolutely. And so it's important to have those moments where you realize that you indeed can count on others and that other people actually do enjoy your company. So that's a case of count on others. Dare to have your needs met. Dare to let others scratch your itch for you. Okay, that sounded a little bit gross. Make you think of some I don't know, infection or whatnot. But it's not. It's not about an infection here. It's not. That's not that kind of itch. But then this also begs the question of what happens when you are a little bit too reliant on others. And that brings me to a book I'm reading. So, Liz Gilbert, Mrs. Eat, Pray, Love, she calls her audience things like love bugs, my June bees, my sweet, delicious huckleberry pies. She talks with very flowery language. And we love Liz. It just tickles me. It tickles me how she'll be like, my sweet buttercups. Did you know that when I was in the yearning of deep thirsting the other day on my walk? Liz had this book come out recently called All the Way to the River. And in this book, she chronicles her journey with loving a woman who was an addict and died early, called Rhea. And also, she talks about her journey to healing from sex and love addiction as a recovering codependent. And I've had some codependent patterns myself, but it's never gotten to the point where Liz got. Because Liz got to a point where she wanted to kill her partner. You heard me correctly. The woman she loved, she started to plot a way to murder her. Why? Because as a recovering codependent, codependent says what? Codependent says, I need you to do as I would like you to do for me to feel okay. And so what I will do is make myself this sacrificial lamb of a doormat and go about trying to meet every possible need I can for you so that I will never lose your love and affection. It's a very controlling way to love. It is making one person your God. And so it's one of those addictions to people and people as your substance that often goes unchecked, unacknowledged, undiagnosed, because, unlike the junkie that shoots up with in the veins and whatnot, or the alcoholic. Why did I say it like that? Alcoholic. But you can kind of fly under the radar for quite some time as a wily and unwell codependent. And so that's just what Liz Gilbert did. And so she got to a point, again, where she was really outsourcing all of her power to this woman and did not know how to scratch any of her own emotional itches without using other people as her medicine. So it's possible to lean so far in the direction of needing others that you're no longer needing them, but using them as a drug. That's codependence, that's sex and love addiction, and that is not it. If you all would like me to do more episodes on that, by the way, let me know down in the comments and we can arrange that to happen. So still, it's important to learn how to lean on others. And by needy, we don't mean desperate. Let's clear the air on that. By needy, we mean, again, going about the business of making sure our social, emotional cup is full. That all the ways that we can receive care to feel nourished, we go about making sure we receive care to feel nourished. And what I've noticed is that often those who give the most go through their day and their week quite emotionally famished. That those who are the emotional glue and fabric of their relationships are the most likely to go with their needs unmet. Isn't that kind of interesting and ironic, right? I'll put it differently. There's this thing called the marriage benefit imbalance. It's this idea that marriage benefits men more than women in most heteronormative dynamics. And why is that? Because men are healthier, they earn more, they have better mental health on the heels of their wives martyring themselves on behalf of their husbands well-being. That sounds gruesome, but it is often the case in unhealthy and imbalanced marriage dynamics. And given the statistics on over 50% of marriages ending in divorce, the overwhelming majority of relationships seem to be quite unhealthy and unfulfilling. And it is also not surprising that in heteronormative dynamics, who is more likely to initiate the divorce? To the audience, women. I wonder why. I wonder why. And so there's this pattern we can see where those who do the most emotional labor in their relationships, those who seem to do the brunt of the caring work and the giving work, are more likely to go with their needs unmet. And you know what's even more scary is then you have people who carry this deep ingrained narrative, like someone who commented on my post the other day. They said, giving with no expectation of a particular outcome is love. And that is so dangerous. That's a dangerous territory to be in. It's a dangerous territory to be in, believing that giving with no expectation is love. Because on one hand, absolutely beautiful to give with no expectation. However, if all of your relationships are pro bono, if all of your relationships have big Mother Teresa energy, I don't even know if Mother Teresa was a good person, but if they do, that's not going to fly. Because what happens when you deplete your store and you're not replenishing it? It runs dry. You, my friend, are not a bottomless well. You, my friend, are not bottomless biscuits. You, my friend, are not bottomless bread. At Bertucci's, right? You have needs. And so what it is so important for givers to remember, for caretakers to remember, for people who do more of the emotional labor in their relationships, their friendships to remember, the reaching out, the hey, how are you doing, the caring to remember, is that sure, you can have certain relationships where you serve from your overflow. That's parenting. You don't expect anything from your child in return for parenting. That is most of your working relationships in your job. That it is a relatively transactional relationship. What you have with a lot of your coworkers, those aren't going to be your lifelines. They might be if they're real friends, but real surface, right? You're not expecting them to really meet your needs. But you have overflow relationships, and then you have lifeline relationships. And lifeline relationships require reciprocity. Overflow, lifeline. Lifeline relationships make deposits in your well. They replenish your biscuit reserves. And what I find is that some of the most generous, caring giver types don't do that work of making sure their needs are met. And why don't we do that work? Well, most of us are just kind of on autopilot. But also, why don't we do that work? Because a lot of us have learned one way or another that our needs are too much or invalid, as we've mentioned. No different than me thinking that it might be a burden for me to reach out to my friend last minute and want to hang out for the day. Well, guess what? If they don't want to hang out, they can opt out. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? And when it comes to people who are the happiest and most successful, what I've noticed is that they're needy. Let me tell you about my cousins. I spent a number of years in corporate, worked in tech, almost became an investment banker back in the day. And I also spent a number of years helping famous podcasters and influencers build their brands online. And I don't mention a lot of their names for legal purposes, but I learned a thing or two about what enabled their success and also what enabled their joy. And what I noticed from an overwhelming majority of these millionaires I worked with closely is that they were so shameless about voicing their needs. Oh my gosh, what? If they need help with something, they're phoning friends. If they need a referral for a new contract they're trying to win, boop, 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 boop. Hey, bro, can you help me with, can you make a referral for my, right? If their week's stressy and packed, they're gonna phone their assistant and their partner and their cousin to help them with food and childcare and this and that. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, well, everyone doesn't have the privilege of that level of support. Well, they didn't just wake up with all that support. Once upon a time when they had less, they decided that they would request more of everyone connected to them. Why? Because on a level they believe they are deserving to receive at the level that they give. Who would have thought? What would it look like if you shamelessly asked for more of what you need? Shamelessly. And if they can't meet those needs, that is not a reflection of your value. If they can't meet your needs, that doesn't mean your needs are invalid. You can collect your goodies, which is your essence, your aura, right? Not your literal goodies. Unless you're talking about the milkshake that brings all the boys to the yard. Damn right. It's better than your... Okay? And you can go elsewhere. That's the thing. I've talked about this in other episodes. I talk about building your tolerance for rejection, your ability to withstand the word no and keep it moving. Oh, that is game changing. That is life changing right there. People who get more of the things they want to thrive and flourish are A-okay with hearing no. They are. They just keep it moving. So successful people, happy people voice their needs. They don't hold it in. They don't do an I'm fine when they aren't fine, right? And then get all resentful toward people without voicing why. Do you know how many relationships just kind of burn to bits and smithereens because people's needs go not only unmet but unexpressed for years, years. I've talked about this in the past where uncommunicated expectations become premeditated resentments, in the words of Neil Strauss. And the way I've seen that manifest in past relationships is, okay, clearly this World War III fight we're having is not about the fact that the bread isn't tied on the counter. It has to do with a whole bunch of pent up resentments that you did not voice. It has to do with a whole bunch of needs that you weren't comfortable voicing from way back when. And all that stuff you repressed didn't go away. It mounted into this atomic explosion of a bad attitude. It didn't have to be like this. It did not. And you know what's so funny about how we're taught to move through this world thinking it's best to be self-reliant and not count on others? We already established we're social primates, so that's hogwash. But also, when people love to tout, oh, self-made, self-made, please. Please. Self-made has always been group-made. It takes not only a village to raise a child, but a village to sustain and support a big adult. At this big age, we should all take pride in having needs and being needy. I spilled my coffee, guys. And here's why. Because when we say have needs, be needy, most people assume, oh, okay, just burden one person with all my stuff, right? Just heap all my baggage, all my burdens in one person's lap. No. The other issue with this culture and the programming of it all, to paraphrase Esther Perel, when it comes to romance, we have learned to make one person our entire village rather than leaning on an entire village for our support. And so a lot of people, because of how, society has been so fragmented and we move away from family and friends, end up approaching love in a very unrealistic way, wherein they expect their partner to be their everything. Their BFF, their girlfriend, their homeboy. You know what I'm talking about? Their hobby buddy, their lover, everything. And it's like, wait a minute. Once upon a time, when we did more communal activities and weren't so atomized and isolated, we counted on a village. We had grandma down the street. We had uncle and auntie upstairs. We had cousins around. We had goats and sheep and ducks and stuff. Huh? Friends. Who would have thought friends that you don't have to send calendar links to meet 3 to 4 months in advance because everyone's so busy being busy? Back when once upon a time we had a whole social support system, we didn't have to count so much on one partner or one person to be our everything. And it's worth finding a way to get back to that. Even if you can't live near all your closest friends, it is worth finding a way to get back to the basics. Back to making more people our rescue, not one person. What's the whole thing in physics where the pressure is proportional to the surface area? It's spread across. So if you apply the same amount of pressure to less surface area, it's more force. But if you apply the same amount of pressure to greater surface area, less force, because it's spread across more. And that same physical principle applies to relationships, which is that if we get a larger net, the right net, and focus on valuing our friendships just as much as we value romantic love, we will make sure our needs are met. Because if there's one person, ring, 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 hey Beth, can you talk to me about my problems? No, she can't. That's fine, because you can go to Harold. And if Harold can't talk, you have your weekly pickleball group, your weekly pumpkin carving group, right? You have other things, and that's important. So in order to embody this whole new way of being, which is the confidently needy person, what does it take to be a person you can count on and to have a person you can count on? I was actually talking with a client the other day about just being needy and having needs. Resources on the next cohort of coaching program down in the link below. If you're a heart-centered visionary, stepping into more expansion, personally, professionally. What does it take to be someone others can count on, to have someone others can count on? Well, for me, my short list is you can be accountable. So if you drop the ball on something, you own it. You're not weird about it or distant or avoidant. You have conflict resolution skills. So if there's a rupture, right, we get into it. You don't just run for the hills and go all gray rock and ghostly on me. We talk it out. We can work this out and we grow through our differences. We don't break and flee from our problems. What else does it take to be someone can count on? Being reliable. How many people talk all this game about how they want their person and their friends to have all these qualities, but it's like, can people count on you? Can people count on you to keep your word? And if you can't keep your word, do you own when you can't keep your word? That's integrity. Can people count on you to be the sort of person who shows up and is stable and steady, not just when things are good, but also when things are bad, right? I'll never forget back when I was working in tech and I was in the company of one of those good vibes only people. You know, one of those spiritual people who prides himself on always being happy. And I'll never forget, I was working in tech, right? And I got the news that they eliminated my job and department. I was devastated. Even though I knew my future was bright, I was floored and I was devastated. And I'll never forget, in the thick of that moment, the person I was with raced to make my sorrow about their comfort rather than making my sorrow about how they could be of support. And this is no shade to them. This is just honest. And in that moment when I lost my job, even though I knew my future was bright, I had a lot of things happening for me outside of that job. In that moment, they said, let's make you happy. Because that made them feel more comfortable than sitting with the weight of grief and the discomfort of all the unknowns that consumed me around, okay, so how are we going to pay the bills this month if the bi-weekly ends this week? You know what I'm saying? And it showed me how, in order to be a good friend to others, be able and willing to deal with uncomfortable emotions, you have to be a safe place for others to land when they're flying with a broken wing. You want to be the sort of person who people feel comfortable sharing their story before they can wrap it in a pretty bow. Are you that sort of person? Or are you only good vibes? Are you Mr. and Mrs. Happy Happy? Are you Mr. and Mrs. only shares your highlight reels online and in person? Because if you give surface, don't be surprised when you get surface. Just saying. So many things we can ponder on this topic, but I'll leave it here. What's your experience with having needs? Daring to voice your needs? Going about the business of making sure your needs are met so you can glisten and glow like the legend you are, e-cousins. Please like, share all this, subscribe to the channel for more. Oh my gosh, we're just getting started here. This is so much fun. If you are a heart-centered visionary in a season of expansion in your work or relationships, click down below for the next step, and we'll talk soon.